We love hip hop.
Right. All right. Let's have a conversation.
Love it.
So we have okay, it's your boy Friday Ricky Dread back with another interview for your head top. And I'm happy to have our second conversation here with this lady because, you know, she's been out here helping a lot of people out in the legal system. And I've also been watching her Instagram and she's been becoming quite the content creator. You know what I'm saying? So with no further ado, I would like to welcome back Jordana GOLDLIST to the building.
Thank you so much.
No, thanks for coming through.
Thanks for having me.
Just to lay this out before we get into our conversation, I want to, because we've already had our initial interview, and I suggest that people go check out the initial interview that we did about 3 years ago.
It's been a while.
When I got to ask you about your history and how you got into law and everything.
Of what I interact with my clients, but what I experienced myself. You can't slap a Band-Aid on a problem and hope that it heals unless you're actually caring for the wound. And so that's what she tried to do. Unfortunately, UTL was not the facility to provide help. Their structuring made things far more problematic for me. And so when I came home, instead of, reintegrating with my peers in Richmond Hill, I was really just looking to get out as quickly as I could.
For the people that don't know, who are just watching, seeing Jordana for the first time, she's a criminal defense lawyer.
You got it.
And she's helped a lot of people get off of some criminal charges. And I want to be able to talk to you about some of the stuff that you're doing, and just some of the cases that are happening in the scene, and get your opinion, your expert opinion on it.
Sure.
So before we even get into anything, since the last time we spoke, what's the biggest case that you've defended?
I mean, I just finished a murder trial in Brampton successfully. That case took 3 years. It's been winding through the system for a long time. Obviously, murder charges are the most serious because you literally have someone's life on the line. So I always take those serious. And then I do a lot of drug trafficking cases and a lot of firearms cases. That's the majority of the work that I'm doing. So I don't think that I have anything really on the docket that's like a small case.
Right. So
I've shortened my practice so that I take on much less work, but all the cases that I'm doing right now are pretty significant. I've got a $15 million auto theft ring out of Hamilton that I'm working through right now, which has been a massive case just in terms of the disclosure. It was a 2-year investigation with multiple different police jurisdictions involved, multiple provinces involved. So the case, the length of the cases right now is taking a long time.
Yeah.
And they're all, pretty significant.
Now, are the lengths of the cases based on just the case itself, or is it the backup that happened from the pandemic and stuff too?
So I think the pandemic backup is done, although our system is still overburdened.
Yes.
Most of our system is overburdened because there's so much inefficiency. It would drive the average person crazy that has no idea of what's happening in the system. So those in the system know that things just take a long time.
Right.
But the amount of inefficiency is unbelievable. We also are in a place where police technology is overwhelming. And so the amount of disclosure that we're now receiving on cases, the amount of evidence that the police are building because they have access to so much technology is just voluminous. And so, the police gather all of their investigation. They give it over to the Crown. The Crown has to review everything and decide what goes to us defense lawyers. And so the process itself takes a long time.
Right.
And then for those of us who have busy practices, it's, often our schedules that are causing delay. So now, we're sitting here in May 2025. The earliest date I can put someone to a trial if we were booking today is the summer of 2026.
Oh, shit.
So I have, a 13, 14 month delay in any event.
Now, I'm interested in the murder trial, and without getting into the details, because these are people's private lives as well.
Yes.
3 years. I know you mentioned how much paperwork that gets provided now at this point, but is that the reason why that took 3 years? And for that, can you give us at least a little bit of details? Like the person, I guess, was accused of murdering somebody, and you helped them beat that.
Correct.
So how do you go about that? Helping somebody beat a murder?
I mean, so every case is different.
Yes.
Some of them, when it comes to murders, it will either be a case of the wrong identity.
Right.
So the wrong person charged with doing whatever the offense is.
Mhm.
So that's sort of option one, is its identity is the issue,
Yes.
which means the person, is looking at a complete acquittal. Oftentimes we have police overcharging. So
Mhm.
sometimes they'll charge people with a first degree murder. Really, they should be only convicted of manslaughter if they can make out the ID.
Right.
Then you have some cases that are based in self-defense, and self-defense is a complete defense, although it's getting more and more difficult to prove given changes in the law in the last 3 years.
Right.
And then there's another defense, it's actual partial defense called provocation. So if I do something to you that would constitute a serious criminal offense that
Mhm.
I could be sentenced for more than 5 years, if
Right.
I come at you and do something and in turn you respond immediately and you kill me in response to what I've done to you, that means I've provoked you,
Mm.
which means you would be found, if a judge or jury concludes that you were provoked, instead of being convicted for murder, you'd be convicted of manslaughter.
Interesting.
So there's a few different avenues of defending people charged with murder.
Okay, so now in the case of, let's say somebody, like I've seen, and salute to Toronto lawyers, right? He defended somebody back, I think about a year ago, but this case was going on for a while, of a home invasion case. And they came into the home and the man was home with his family and he
I know
shot the
that one.
intruders.
In Milton.
Yes.
Yes.
And he was arrested because we have
Yes.
different gun laws over here. We don't have
We have
proper
horrible
self-defense laws, right?
Correct.
So he got arrested for that, and he had
Yes.
to fight a murder charge
Yes.
for that. But
For-
he beat it.
So yes and no, he did beat it.
Okay.
It took 9 months. The Crown withdrew the charges.
Mm-hmm.
But that man went through hell for 9 months. He was in jail for 6 weeks. So his I think his father had died. It was just him and his mom. 4 or 5 guys broke into the house. It was a full armed home invasion.
Yes.
He was a legal gun owner. He took his legal gun from wherever it was he stored it, loaded it, and came down to protect his home and his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And still got arrested, still went to jail, spent 6 weeks in jail, had to pay for a lawyer, I imagine. And ultimately, it took 9 months for a Crown to realize, oh shit, this was a case of self-defense. Like, how do you not?
So, okay, there's 2 questions that pop up in my mind because of this. One, you said he's a legal gun owner.
Correct.
Now, he used a handgun,
Yes.
but aren't we not allowed to have handguns in Canada?
No, we do.
Okay. So now I'm confused.
So Justin Trudeau, in his infinite wisdom, and I say that, yes, he banned handguns
Mhm.
in the summer of 2022. What he did was ban the importation, sale, and transfer of
Right.
handguns. But for those of us who legally possessed handguns at the time, we can still have them.
We can keep them.
Correct.
Okay, so
handguns are not illegal in Canada, but currently, and hopefully at some point this changes, but for now, it's illegal to import, sell, or transfer them.
Interesting. So if you already have one previous to that law, you
Correct.
can keep it.
Correct.
But if
You
not,
can bring it to the range, you can shoot it at the range, you
Interesting.
can use it as you did before, but you can't sell it or transfer it to someone else.
interesting. So, and
Which means that the only guns coming into Canada are illegal guns.
basically,
Right.
basically. And with that, I had a second question around that, but I don't even remember right now, but it'll come back to me later. You did something as far as a chapter. You added a chapter to a law book that students are reading now.
Yes,
right?
I did.
The criminal justice in Canada, a textbook for university students across the country.
That's right.
So tell me about that. How did that come to fruition?
So the producer is friends with the judge who I had spent many years in front of,
Mhm.
out of 1000 Finch. And the judge called me up. It was during COVID. Courts were locked down.
Mhm.
So listen, my friend or colleague is doing this textbook. Do you want to be a part of it? I'd love for you to write the chapter.
Right.
And I was absolutely. What a great experience and what a great opportunity, especially because I have, a very different vantage point within the criminal justice system, having been through it myself, been through the streets myself, trying to help people without becoming a social worker to my clients, because
Right.
that's, a very delicate balance for me. But I thought if I could actually educate undergraduate students before they even get to law school and start having them think about things like the situations and circumstances that land someone before the courts. Right. Because when I was going through law school, everyone was just had this like whole cop and robber mentality, right? Cops are the good guys, the robbers are the bad guys, criminals are criminals. That's a character trait. And I got there, I was like, what are you talking about? This is so far removed from the reality of what the majority of people going through the system are actually about.
Yeah.
So this chapter in this book allows me to give another side and to give the perspective of the defense lawyer, and especially one who has a bit of a unique perspective in that, give these kids a different way to think about the system before they even get to law school.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about in the future maybe teaching some law classes?
I've thought about putting together sort of like a master class for law students coming out of law school.
Yeah.
I think that might be helpful. I don't know that I have the patience to be a teacher, especially now in our current sort of political climate. I think I'd get in trouble, quite frankly. But that's part of why I've, developed the social media platform that I have. The reason that I spend so much time and effort on social media and trying to educate people who aren't in the system about what it means for someone to land in the system is that educational component.
Yeah. No, because your page is pretty active, and you're always giving tips on different things, on ways that you can prevent getting in trouble and stuff like that.
Yes.
So it's definitely helpful. And even speaking of like your social media activities, you started the Who Judges the Judge podcast.
Yes.
For a little while, yeah. And then
you go to high school, like in Ottawa as well?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I drop out, I get kicked out from I attended because I wanted to be an actor, right? Or
right. So let's do this. What inspired you first? And then let's go through some of the trials and tribulations of having a podcast. So what inspired you to start a podcast?
So similar to you, I had people that told me I should have a podcast. I talk to people for a living. And one of the things I love about my job, and especially, doing homicide cases, is because they take so long, I really get to know the client.
Yes.
Right? It's not just a file that I throw in a cabinet. I think about the person and their family and, the general circumstances with which they end up coming into my office. And I like having those conversations with people, and oftentimes I find myself at dinner parties with people who aren't in the criminal justice system. And they're always like, why are so many people killing each other?
Yeah.
Why is this happening on our streets? Why do we have so much gun violence? And I can sit down and say, well, this is why. I've spoken to this person and this is what I hear. And obviously without naming names. But, giving that context. And a lot of people are just unaware of what's going on. And I felt like if I could create a podcast to tell other people's stories the same way that I tell mine, one, it gives them a voice. So I wanted to give people who feel voiceless an opportunity to tell their situation and their story, but also to help educate the masses on what's really going on.
Yeah. And even when it comes to like podding, like what have you noticed offhand, like first starting off a podcast? What's the first thing that came that hit you right away?
So I recorded my first 7 episodes in 3 days.
Okay.
I had hired a producer, and we picked space, and he, was traveling from out of province. And so we said, okay, let's just do the first 7 episodes. We'll bang them out. And so I didn't have time to listen to them in between before going to the next and the next.
Right.
And then we started, producing them, and I started listening to them, and I realized that I took with me the same principles as I would do a cross-examination in court. And rule number 1 about a cross-examination in court is never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. Right? Because you are crafting the story. You don't want to open it up for a witness or a victim or a cop to say something that you don't want to hear. So I realized when I was listening to my first 7 episodes, I wasn't asking any of the questions that sparked my own curiosity.
Right.
I was sticking to the script of what I knew already.
You're asking questions you already know the answers
totally.
to.
And I felt like it stunted the conversation because obviously in a podcast, you're looking to have that meaningful conversation and build off of it. So I really took that one to heart. Stopped doing so much research about my guests before we started. So I have a general overview and I know why I want to speak to everyone and what I'm speaking to. But I let the conversation flow much naturally now.
Yeah.
And I ask the questions that I'm truly curious about. And I try to give, leeway for my guests to have the answers they want to provide instead of trying to control the conversation the way that I would control a cross-examination in court. So that was my biggest lesson, is this is not court and I need to change the approach.
Yeah, it's different. Like we had a conversation behind the scenes, and I have conversations with people all the time.
Right.
But then there's a difference between having a conversation with somebody just in regular real life and then when the cameras and the lights are on.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
And some people don't understand that even when it comes to like conversational style pods. They'll just start talking and talk over each other and blah, blah, blah. Everybody who has a thought that pops into their head, they just say it, and it's like, that's for the auditory. That's like, sounds like audio snow, you know what I'm saying? Like a snowstorm. But there's a technique to podcasting. So eventually you're going to, as you listen to your episodes back, make sure to do that too.
Yes.
Watch back all of your shit, because you're going to start noticing different things and your body movements and all that. And you're like, okay, I'm going to change this, add that. You know what I'm saying? Even when it comes to the podcasting, who's your dream guest?
You're going to laugh. My dream guest?
Yeah.
Courtney Love.
Why would I laugh?
Courtney Love would be my dream guest for a number of reasons. So, as you know, I went through a very, very turbulent time during my teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of difficulty even as like a preteen. She was just sort of hitting the scene with her punk music, and the level of like anger and angst just resonated with me when I was young.
Yes.
Then I went through horrible times on the street, horrible drug addict. And as I was cleaning up, so was she. And I started seeing her on the cover of magazines cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone knows her history, which she was never quiet about, she was a horrible junkie as well.
Yeah.
And so when I was seeing her get clean, I thought, if she can do it, surely I can too. And it was such an inspiration for me to find my sobriety. And so I would love to hear more about her story and have her on the show for sure.
Interesting. I did not know that from our
Yes.
last conversation. I didn't know that Courtney Love was an inspiration
I know.
of yours.
Courtney Love was a huge inspiration for me,
salute to
only
Courtney
because she did it, and it was proof to me at a time when, people weren't outspoken about addiction, people weren't outspoken about mental health. Like we're talking 1999, 2000, right?
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about mental health or addiction as an issue. Drug addicts were just throwaways in society.
Yeah.
And so to see somebody who was like front and center and owning their own sobriety for me was huge.
No, that's amazing. I'm going to open up the conversation a little bit.
It's your conversation.
And I want to ask you about a few things that have been gone
Sure.
on the timeline, different court cases that I've seen. We're going to go back to last year when Top5 first touched the street. Discover Cans, where quality meets innovation. With over 24 premium strains, each carefully sealed in our signature cans for maximum freshness. We're redefining the cannabis experience. Trusted Canada-wide for consistency and reliability. We deliver the product you deserve. Elevate your expectations and explore the difference with Cans. You can find Cans on Instagram at @Cans_Canada, or you can find them on the Diamond Club page, DiamondClub_Ontario. Make sure to use the code WeLoveHipHop on the way out and get yourself a little discount. Salute to the sponsors. Cheer. Okay. His court case was like a big case because he was able to get his charges stayed because they weren't able to use the evidence from his lyrics. And the lyrics were a big part of what the Crown was trying to use against him. I was even in one of the hearings when they were presenting a bunch of different lyrics and saying like different signs that he was doing in music videos. And his lawyer, Gary Grill, was able to get an expert to come in and basically have the lyrics not be able to be used against him.
Right.
Do you think that's going to set a legal precedence moving forward?
I hope so.
And do you think that lyrics should be able to be used against rappers in court?
No, I don't. I've never seen a case in which, some rock stars lyrics were used against them.
Yeah.
Ever. So no, I don't think so. And I'm curious to see what this happens with some people who, or the results of this on people who have already been convicted.
Yes.
Lamar Skeet was, I think, the first in Canada to have rap lyrics used against him as really the linchpin of the Crown's case against him on a murder charge.
Yeah.
And he's still sitting in. He got convicted of first-degree murder on the basis of rap lyrics for, a rhyme he wrote while in jail.
Yeah.
It's sad. So we'll see. I'm hoping that he has, an appeal team that can look at this and see if this can be reopened again. I know that he is spent a lot of time trying to fight for his freedom,
Mhm.
and hopefully this will ignite that fight further for him. But no, I don't think rap lyrics should be used. I think that time and time again, we have seen how they are just an expression for most people of their own frustration, observations of what's going on in their community. When you look at the rappers who, make it to the Grammys, like if their lyrics were used against them, none of them would be on stage.
Yeah.
Right? They'd be sitting in a cell with Diddy right now.
True. Well, even staying on lyrics being used, because there's a big court hearing, or I don't know if they call it a court case. I guess there's a petition that Drake has against UMG.
Oh, it's a court case. He's sued.
Yes.
Yes.
So do you think that there's validity to him being able to sue the record company for boosting Kendrick Lamar's song, calling him a PDF?
It's going to be interesting because that's crossing a whole other line.
Yes.
That's not insulting him in his manner of dress. It's not just insulting him in terms of, the women that he decides to spend his time with. Like there was a line that was crossed there, whether or not that actually constitutes, a triable issue for court remains to be seen for
Yes.
sure. But I can see where we differentiate that, right? As crossing a line in defamation. But you also have to understand, like, they went tit for tat there pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. They both said wild shit about each
They
other.
really did.
Yeah.
Even some of the, the songs that weren't as big of hits
Mhm.
as Not Like Us was.
Yeah.
I listened to a few of them and was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
We're really pushing buttons here.
So can Drake win this case though?
I mean, his lawyer seems to think so. I don't do civil.
Mhm.
I don't do civil litigation. So I don't say he can or he can't. They've just added to the suit. I think they just expanded it in order to include the presentation at the Super Bowl.
Yes.
So he clearly has a legal team that believes that there's a valid argument there.
Mm-hmm. And just for the crowd who doesn't know, with the Super Bowl, he didn't actually say the word, but the fact that he blanked it, they're trying to say that there's a problem because they know that there's the word was there in the first place.
I mean, listen, most of that stadium was singing along.
Yes.
So most people are very much aware of what words he wasn't saying. And it was
Yeah.
just the fact that there were so many other ties to Drake that everyone watching that who understood the song and understood the beef knew this was completely at Drake.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no question in anyone's mind.
Yeah.
So, and that's really, I think, what the basis of the expansion of that lawsuit is everyone knows. And is that fair to Drake? Well, again, we'll see what the court does with that. But now there's talk about whether that's going to quell some of the, the ethos of rap battles in general.
Well, that was my next question, because let's say Drake and his legal team win, hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
Does that set a legal precedence moving forward
course.
now?
Of course.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what happens now when it comes to rap battles? Are we going to have to like sift through the lyrics and be like, which lyrics are able to be litigated and stuff?
Right.
Right? Is that where we're going to be going?
And it's only going to be for people who are successful, right? Because don't forget, if Kendrick Lamar wasn't Kendrick Lamar and he was a no-name rapper who said the exact same things about Drake would not be suing because there would be no money for the lawyers to collect from.
True.
Right? In a civil lawsuit, you're really only going after the deep pockets.
Yes.
So that you could get something in return. Otherwise, you have what's called a judgment that you can never satisfy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if you sue me and I have no money, you'll get a piece of paper that says, I owe you, whatever, $100 million.
Right.
If I don't have two pennies to rub together, it's just a piece of paper you've won. So it's only going to affect people who actually have the money that would be, receptive to a payout.
Yeah. And just to explain for the people who don't understand, this between a civil suit and a criminal suit. The criminal suit is obviously something that you can go to jail for. Civil is just for the money.
Correct.
Can you have how is it that you can have civil suits without criminal action? Because I see that a lot.
Oh, totally, totally different. So civil action means a person or a company is suing another person or a company. It has nothing to do with the police. There are times where people are in both realms, right? So you think of like assault cases right now. So oftentimes the victim of assault will sue the perpetrator of assault and also go to the police, and the police will also lay charges.
Right.
So there can be both happening at the same time, but they don't need to. So civil is more like a property dispute, an issue around money, medical malpractice, car accidents, all of that shit falls under civil litigation. And it just means like a person or business is suing another person or business.
Now, there's some cases that I've seen, and there's so much stuff I see on the timeline. I won't even try to give a specific one, but there are cases that they should be criminal charges, but then there's only suing civilly. It's like, sex assault charges too, right? Don't those look a little bit shaky? Like this happened with Jay-Z the other day. Weren't they trying to sue him civilly and add it into the Diddy case?
Yeah, he crushed that really quick.
Really
quick.
But the thing is, doesn't it look weird already from the jump because you're not suing him criminally for something so heinous?
So it's up for the police to decide whether or not they want to pursue criminal charges, whereas you don't need the police to decide. And then, I don't know, I imagine that some victims don't want to be put through the cross-examination of a criminal trial. They don't want a judge to decide whether or not they're guilty. The reality is oftentimes, and I think that's what a lot of these women expect, is that they sue civilly. And just to prevent from having to go through the legal fees, they'll get some sort of payout.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes it's a financial trade, right? Like it can cost more for someone like Jay-Z to pay the lawyers and go through all of the publicity that can be around it than it would be just to pay her off. Obviously, with someone like that, he doesn't care, and his reputation obviously means more to him than whatever it was going to cost. But that's oftentimes, I guess, the thought behind it. Is might as well just sue, get some money, and then I don't have to go through the criminal trial. Right. And the reality is at the end of the criminal trial, the victim doesn't get anything. She doesn't get money. She maybe gets some vindication or not.
Right.
I think it's really difficult.
And you also got to pay the lawyer up front, I would imagine, when it comes to the criminal cases.
Criminal cases, so the accused has to pay their lawyer.
Yes.
The victim's represented by the Crown.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to get a little clarity on that because I see so much of those and I'm just like, all right, why aren't you suing this person criminally, right? Now, when it comes to the Tory Lanez case, I want to take a quick break from this episode to give a big shout out to Only Loud, Canada's one-stop shop for your favorite legacy brands and all things loud. Only Loud provides mail order delivery nationwide and same-day delivery to those in the Ottawa area. Check them out at onlyloud.ca or follow them on their socials, Instagram at onlyloudcanada or on Snapchat onlyloud.ca for more exclusive content. Only Loud is not just a product, it's a lifestyle. Big salute to the sponsors. Cheer.
Yes.
Okay, Tory Lanez.
What a shit show.
Yeah, for when people are seeing this, there's been the updates of him getting stabbed 14 times. He's had a press conference of giving some new evidence that Kelsey might have been the shooter.
Well, it was the security guard, Kelsey's security guard, came out and said, "Oh, by the way, it actually was Kelsey that shot Megan Thee Stallion and not Tory." And so effectively, he's serving time for someone else's crime and just almost got killed.
Now, that's crazy.
It is crazy.
Where did Tory's legal team go wrong, or where did he go wrong in handling this in a legal matter? Because if he's an innocent man sitting in jail, he obviously took a lot of wrong steps.
Yeah, I mean, I've never reviewed the disclosure, so I don't want to say what they did or didn't do. The security guard apparently is saying that throughout the trial, he was protecting Kelsey and didn't want to come forward. Could they have hired a private investigator? Could they have done a better job with cross-examination? Is there other evidence that was, within the case that they could have turned to? Were there surveillance cameras? Was there? I don't know. I can't say, but something very much went wrong.
Yeah.
It's one thing when you run a self-defense case and the jury doesn't believe someone was acting in self-defense. It's one thing if they don't believe someone was sufficiently provoked. But when you have an ID case and you're saying, no, this person really didn't even commit the offense, it's awful.
How would you have defended this case? Like with the evidence just that we know from public, okay? We see the video of Megan walking backward. We don't know who shot the gun. There's the phone call that came in with Tory calling Kelsey. And now he calls you and says, Jordana, I need you to represent me.
Right.
What's your legal plan on getting Tory Lanez off?
I mean, you have to go through every piece of evidence and you have to come up with a strategy based on the evidence that you have. I think that I don't know if the security guard was subpoenaed. I don't know if he testified. Did he lie on the stand? Because
Which
you can't
security
prevent
guard?
that. The one who's now come forward to say that Tory wasn't the shooter. You know, there are ways that you can compel a witness to court. And so, you know, if I'm the lawyer in that situation and Tory says to me, listen, this security guard was there, would have seen that I wasn't the one with the shooter, you know, you subpoena that guy to court.
Now, just to make sure that we keep everything in facts, that security guard said that he overheard Kelsey saying this to her husband during the trials and stuff like that. So he wasn't like anywhere near the scene. He just overheard during the trial times that she said this to her husband in the car.
Okay.
Right?
And so, you know, the trick is to speak to everyone that you possibly can. Again, I don't know enough about what was available to say what went wrong. Like, I don't think that's fair, you know, to me or to his legal team, right? I don't want to say, oh, they fucked up this way when I don't actually have enough of the facts.
Right.
But in any of these cases, you have to treat every piece of disclosure like a puzzle. And you have to look at all of the pieces and figure out how they fit together and how each one can be built off the next in order to get the result that you need.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what pieces were available to his legal team at the time or what he said, listen, this is missing. We need to get this. You know, I have situations where people call me and they're like, hey, there's a security camera across the street. I know this building has it. You know, you have to pull it. I've had cases where, for example, I had a case out of Hamilton many, many years ago where a client was, you know, accused of being a drug trafficker. They found drugs. We got the information to obtain the search warrant, which is like an affidavit from a police officer that's needed to be provided to a justice of the peace who then signs off on a search warrant. So when we get those, I always sit down with my client and say, listen, let's go through this together. You tell me what facts the police got wrong because I don't know where you are on any given day and I don't know what you're doing.
And you weren't there.
And so at one point, the officer had written that he made observations of my client selling drugs behind a building. And my client looked at me and said, there's a security camera there. Go get the security camera. You'll see it wasn't me. And so started making these disclosure requests for this security camera. As it turns out, there was a security camera. Nothing the cop said would be seen was actually seen. And the Crown had to withdraw the charges. So sometimes you need, you know, a client's input to be able to say, listen, this is the piece that's missing. Or this is where, you know, someone is lying. And you got to just pull it apart.
Interesting. And, you know, when it comes to these high profile cases, they have like a legal team. Now, do you work solo most of the time or sometimes do you work like with a team?
No, I always work with a team.
Okay. So you're working from the team, like from your own firm?
Correct.
Now, we're going to move on to the Diddy case. Okay. The Diddy case is going on. It's going to be going on for the next 8 weeks. But he hired the same lawyer that Young Thug had to add to his legal team. Can you give us some clarity on how that works? Because now he has a legal team. Now he's hiring another lawyer and they're coming. So it's like a bunch of different firms coming together. Like, how did that work?
You know, as long as you have a team that works together and nobody's bringing their ego to the table, you're always going to be better with more eyes on a situation. Right? Everyone's going to see something a little bit different or have a different experience. And it's really important. So even within my office, like, my cousin's also a criminal defense lawyer. We share space. So we have an office together. She has her firm. I have my firm. She has her associates. I have mine. Every time we're working on a major case, we're sitting in each other's office. Hey, this is the case. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? And it's not that neither one of us are capable of doing it ourselves. It's you need that other perspective. What do you think about this? How should I approach this? You know, whenever I do a murder case, I have at least one other lawyer who's doing the case with me. And I have, you know, paralegals that are helping to run the office, one that's helping to deal with my disclosure, another lawyer at the office. Like, you work together in a team. You have
Interesting.
to. Have to.
I did not know that.
Yes.
This is so good to get the clarity of like what it is behind the scenes when it comes to like the lawyers and the legal teams and stuff like that. Because in my mind, it's such a competitive game that it's like, I ain't going to be working with you. Like, you're on that firm over there. I'm I represent my firm. You know what I'm saying?
So if someone came to me and said, listen, I really want you, but I also want this other lawyer and I'm prepared to pay you both to be there,
Yes.
we would work together, right? As
Interesting.
long as it's two personalities that will work together.
Mhm.
You don't want to be in a situation where you have a legal team of everyone's trying to like be the right voice, as opposed to let's all work collaboratively to ensure that the client gets the best outcome.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Now, with this Diddy case, there's been a bunch of different evidence that has come out now. From the time we're taping this is probably day 4, or I think we're going into day 5 of the trial. Cassie's been on the stand. She's been cross-examined. But that's not it. There's going to be more people that are going to be on the stand. And
there was before her too, right? One of the escorts.
Yes, one of the escorts was also on the stand and gave some like wild details.
Yes.
With everything that's being laid out so far, just what we have so far, we're not going to go into the future. Do you think that he'll be able to beat this case?
I think that there needs to be corroboration beyond what we've seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from what I understand, that will happen with the coming witnesses. So it started, I think, the first escort sort of laid the groundwork. And I think it was smart of the prosecutor to not just start with her and then just build up from her, but you've already laid the groundwork with one. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the defense lawyers do with the relationships between the Crown's witnesses, because obviously whether or not there's any collusion to the corroboration is going to be an issue.
Right.
From everything that we're reading, and if we want to believe 50 Cent, he's in some real trouble, Diddy. Like real trouble.
Yes, but I feel like the tide has been turning online, at least, based off of Cassie's testimony. A lot of people are saying, yes, it's a lot of freaky shit.
Yes.
But is it a RICO's worth of freaky shit?
Right.
And this is what I think a lot of people are having an issue with now. I'm starting to see Free Diddy as a hashtag.
Are you?
Yes.
I haven't seen that.
The tide is
interesting.
Not completely turned, but it's turning.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, like, is there anything that you think that, like, even just based off of the testimony of Cassie, like, did they do some missteps?
I don't think so. I think that, and this is part of the problem, right? We can't extract one piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had cases where during the entirety of the Crown's case, it looks like my client is sunk. And then I present defense evidence. And all of a sudden, there's a complete shift.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's like a puzzle that you put together. You can't see the full picture until all the puzzle pieces are in play.
Mm-hmm.
We can see part of it and maybe it's shifting here. But that's why I'm so reluctant to say, he's going to get convicted just based on what we've heard so far, because we really haven't heard enough. And if the witnesses that are coming forward are going to corroborate more of the allegations, then I think it's going to be hard to defeat.
Yeah.
If, however, it seems like they've come together and invented this story, which is why I'm talking about, the collusion between the different witnesses, they're in a different position for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like we spoke about earlier, Jay-Z was implicated in this case. That
for like
was squat.
24 hours.
Yeah, maybe 48 tops.
Someone was like, oh, let's include him too. And he's just like not having it.
But to me, that damaged the credibility of the case, because like people are now just doing let's throw some shit to the wall and see what sticks.
Yes.
Right. So now that we're in the actual trial, it doesn't all of that come into play too? Can we use some of that and say, well, I don't know, like, is this a witch hunt? Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be a Diddy defender. I'm just trying to make sure that we lay out everything before just saying, lock this guy up for 30 years.
Agreed. And I think that we need to see more than just what people are saying. We need to see, video surveillance. We're going to see receipts. We're going to see, I don't know if, who knows if he's kept a logbook, the number of my clients that keep their debt list in their cell phones. Like, it's not just finding the fentanyl in the car. It's what else is there that's going to tie the person to the allegations.
Yeah.
So I think that's really going to be the crux of the case. I don't think it's going to come down to a he said, she said.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be, okay, what else is there to confirm what either party is saying?
Yeah. And we also have to prove the extortion parts too, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's the main thing of why I think they're they've given him the RICO that he's been extorting so many people over the years, right?
Yes.
So to prove extortion, like I know
There
it's
needs to be,
hard to
like,
prove
threats,
murder.
intimidation,
Yes.
things of that nature.
How hard is it to prove extortion?
Again, I mean, I don't know if he's writing text messages or sending threatening emails to people.
Mm-hmm.
It won't be very difficult.
Right.
But if he's isolated himself and that hasn't happened, and, you know, it's one thing to prove that people were extorted, that then has to tie back to him personally.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's using other people to send those messages or deliver that messages, I think it's, again, 6 degrees of separation.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and the fact that they said they predicted that it's going to take 8 weeks, I really don't even think it's going to take that long.
I don't know what else they have. That's the thing, right? We don't know what they have.
That's true.
So that's why I'm like, oh, we're so early days, right? We're day, 5 now out of an 8-week trial. What else is coming?
How did he determine that they? And I think this is a question I might know the answer to myself. Like, how did he determine that it's going to take 8 weeks? Is it the amount of disclosure they have to present?
Yeah, it's the number of witnesses
Mhm.
and how long you expect each witness to be. And if there's legal arguments on top of that, they're always an estimate. But, experienced lawyers can know that, okay, Cassie's going to take 4 days on the stand.
Yeah.
The escorts are going to take a day each. You might have some like officers who, I don't know, collected some evidence and they have to put a video surveillance, for example. Maybe that'll take an hour. So they just look at the entire sort of cast of characters. They put an estimate for how long it's going to take for each and calculate accordingly.
Interesting.
Yes.
Couple more things I want to ask about, even with podcasting, okay? There was the whole West Coast RICO that went down with Big U, okay? I don't know if you've been kept up with that.
No.
So Big U, big time, alleged Crip gang leader in Los Angeles. He was arrested. They're looking to give him 600 years. But then a lot of different people around him, they've arrested them and taken them down. And they're saying a lot of it is for stuff that they said on podcasts.
Oh, wow.
Right? Now, I know we spoke about music being used in court.
Yes.
Is there anything to now podcast, what people say on podcasts being able to be used in court? And like, how does that work now?
Well, there's nothing that prevents it. Like, at the end of the day, you're really just using people's own statements against them.
Right.
Which is completely admissible at any given time. I got your little guy visiting. Someone's own statement is admissible against them.
Mhm.
It's not admissible against someone else. It's considered hearsay unless it's necessary. But, if I say something incriminating, it can be used against me in court. Period. Full stop. And it doesn't matter where I say it, right? It doesn't matter if it's in a text message that the police sees off my phone.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if it's in a communication with someone. That's why, people that are picked up on wires, people that are picked up on audio probes, for example, that the police are now putting into people's cars and homes.
What the hell is that?
Yeah. We have no privacy at all.
Audio
It's frightening.
probes?
Yes. Audio probes. Police are now getting general warrants to put a probe in someone's car so that when they're driving around and they're on their phone or they're having people in their car and they're conducting their business, the police are listening.
Wow.
Yes.
Yo,
Yes.
Jordana came here to bring the real today.
Yes.
Wow.
It's been for a while
know.
now. Yes. 2
That's
years.
crazy. Okay. As far as even with us over here in Canada, we just had an election.
You want to call it that?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Right? Just a spring pop election just out of the blue.
Yes.
And now we have a new Prime Minister, Mark Carney.
Sure. With the same cabinet doing the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess you don't think that we made the right choice.
No. We did
Tell
not
me
make
why.
the right choice.
And I'm not coming from a person who voted.
Our country's in shambles right now.
Mhm.
We've been in shambles for a long
A
time.
little bit closer.
People can't afford life.
Yeah.
They can't afford their expenses. They can't afford to eat. Car insurance is through the roof, like over and over and over again. When I travel and I meet people, and a lot of people ask me about taxes in Canada, and I have to explain to them, well, there's excise tax on all the goods that come in,
Mm-hmm.
income tax, corporate tax, land transfer tax, property tax, luxury tax if
Yeah.
you're buying a vehicle more than $100,000. Like, we are taxed every which way to Sunday, and the only people winning is the government.
Yeah.
Our roads are an absolute mess. There's potholes everywhere. Our medical system is an absolute mess. There are people who are now traveling for just basic healthcare.
Yeah.
It's not just like cosmetic surgeries anymore. It's people are literally traveling because the lineups here to get what they need, like necessary surgeries, are so long
Yeah.
that they can't deal with it anymore. And yet we're taxed every which way possible. So no, I don't think that we made the right decision. I think that we have a government that is dividing us. I think that we as a society don't talk about underlying issues enough. We think that when we sit on one side of the political spectrum, it necessarily determines who we are as people. And I don't think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we don't spend enough time talking about the real issues. So people were so scared of, the quote unquote far right that they didn't want to vote conservative,
Right.
but ask them why they voted liberal and they can't tell you. They can't talk about the liberal platform, which I didn't understand to be helpful to Canadians at all. So no, I don't think we made the right decision. I don't think we're talking about issues that truly matter in ways that are going to provide solutions for us as a community.
Mm. Now, on the other side, though, the conservative government that they wanted to vote in with Poilievre, he wanted to do some really heavy things as far as the legal system, like
He did.
no parole, no probation. I think he wanted to implement a three strikes rule over here.
Yes.
So I don't know if that would have been the right choice either.
But that wouldn't have passed. Everyone forgets that, the government can make those changes, but they still have to be put to the test in courts.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just going to be constitutional challenges to them, the same way there was to, mandatory minimum sentences for people who were caught with a firearm,
Mm-hmm.
right? The last conservative government put down all of these mandatory minimums. I think 90% were overturned.
Yeah.
So, that wasn't really a concern because the courts will look after that. When the government does something that's so far off, and that's, the beauty that we have here in Canada of that division between what the government's doing and the oversight from the courts,
Right.
it would have self-corrected. And it would have self-corrected in a way that would have allowed people to still not be choked financially.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think that, let's say that was a thing that was going to be able to happen. Let's say he was able to go through with his promise. If Poilievre got in charge, would that have been a good look? Because we kind of do need probation in a way, right?
I have two minds about probation. I think probation needs to be done different.
Mm-hmm.
I think parole has to be done different. I think that the average person who is not in the system thinks that people go to jail, and in jail they have access to education, and they have access to employment training, and they have access to mental health services, and they have access to, addiction services.
Right.
People really, like the people that I meet in my day-to-day life that aren't a part of this system at all, that's what they think.
Right.
And so they think that when people come out and continue to commit crimes, they're doing so because they're bad people.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that's not the case. People are sent to jail and then they're released into the exact same environment with the exact same skill set they had before they went into jail.
Right.
And so we can't be surprised when they make the same choices.
Yeah.
So I don't think the probation and parole right now are doing enough to help break these patterns of recidivism because they're not giving people those skills that they need and the opportunities they need to make different choices.
Right.
They're right now, they're just a monitoring system. You go on probation, you got to check in with your probation officer. Your probation officer has so many cases. You're lucky if they remember who you actually are.
Yeah.
And all they're there to do is make sure that you're following your rules. And if you're not following your rules, they're calling the police and you're being charged again.
Yeah.
So how's that helpful? I don't even know how many billions of dollars are spent across this country on probation and parole to do something that it's not accomplishing in a way that it can't possibly accomplish that goal.
Yeah. And there's also a problem that people say that we have like a very a catch and release type of system over here. Do you believe that?
So I think we have a catch and release system for some offenses, and I think we see a lot of people who are released and committing the same crimes, but where they're being released into the exact same circumstances. We also we have a system that people aren't scared of. And I think that the problem isn't with the jail system, it's with the community resources available to people.
Interesting.
I don't think that we do enough to help people make better choices and give them better opportunities. A lot of, the young kids that are getting into the drug game right now really aren't making that much money to make the sentences worthwhile. Especially when you're talking about fentanyl, where kids are getting, I say kids, but like youth and certainly like guys in their young 20s that are just getting caught up in that life. I mean, they're looking at really, really significant sentences for very little money.
Wow. Like 20-year sentences for a few grams of fentanyl or...
Nah, not quite that bad. So, on an ounce right now for an adult as a first offender, somewhere in the 5 to 7 year range for an ounce of fentanyl, which is still significant. You send a 20-year-old to the penitentiary for 5 years. You're literally sending them to what I think would arguably the most violent environment in Canada is our federal system. So you're sending them into that. You're expecting them to come out a whole different human in a better way.
Yeah.
Without any resources.
I don't know, Jordana, because 5 years, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of like one of the young man then, right?
Right.
You give me 5 years for an ounce of fentanyl, that's soft to me.
Right.
I'm like, whatever, I'll be back.
Right.
Right. Especially if I'm like 21, I'll be home at 20. I'll be home by 23 because you're only going to do 2/3.
Yes.
And just where's the plug? Let me go back outside.
But that's what I'm saying. Nobody really minds.
So I feel like maybe
it's not helping, and they're going to jail and they're not being taught that they can do anything different.
Yes, but maybe this is just maybe it's my conservative brain thinking, right? Give them 10 for the ounce of fentanyl. Now you're going to have to think twice about selling the Fenty.
Maybe, or not. You spend 10 years in jail. You spend 10 years without any sort of resources to help you want to do different, especially when you're that young and you're being programmed that if someone looks at you the wrong way, you have to stab him. Otherwise, you are potentially a victim for the rest of your stay. What you're doing to someone's psyche, how do they come out? How do you come out on the other side of that as like a happy, healthy, productive human that wants to get a 9 to 5 job? You don't. You can't. You can't. It's not possible. So I just think that we're doing it completely wrong. I think that we have to look at why does this 21-year-old think that he needs to sell fentanyl in order to get that G-Wagon?
Yeah.
Why is there not another route in his mind that will get him the things that he wants and the things that he wants to accomplish?
Yeah.
We also have to look at the other side of the drug game, which is the user. Right? Nobody looks at the fact that like without the demand, there is no supply.
This is true.
And we have a society right now that's really hurting. The number of people that are ending up homeless because they can't afford to keep their homes and then ending up addicted to drugs because they've lost their homes is stark. It's not the reverse anymore. I think that 20 years ago, you would understand when the addict falls victim and loses their home and loses all of their things.
Yeah.
The opposite is happening right now.
You're losing your home, then you become
you're becoming an addict. And now you need something to help make street life bearable.
Yeah, take the edge off.
And who created that? That was the liberal government.
Yeah.
Right? Those were those COVID checks. $2,000 a month to every drug addict and every potential drug dealer and taking kids out of school and out of work. It created an absolute shitstorm that is not being addressed.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's irreversible damage.
I don't know that it's irreversible, but we can't just keep doing the same thing and electing the same government and expecting a different response.
Yeah, no, definitely.
We need to change.
Last couple of questions I have for you here, because we are talking about like a lot of different legal things in Canada, legal, things that are legal or illegal, just for lack of a better term. With the handguns, okay, because there's been an issue with handguns in Canada forever. From the time before I was a kid, there was an issue with handguns coming in from the United States.
Yes.
We have issues with self-defense laws and stuff like that. Should we legalize handguns in Canada again?
So I do think so. I think that we should have a better armed population and an intelligently armed population.
Mhm.
I think that you can't be surprised with all of these home invasions when kids know that they can come into your home. Especially if you've got a liberal sign sitting on your lawn, you're not going to shoot them. There's
Yeah.
no risk, you know. And for anyone who's, you know, under the age of 18, they're probably not even going to jail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see some wild shit on the news, the way that they just go into people's homes, take the car
Yes.
keys from in front of the
Yes.
house.
Our police are telling them telling homeowners to leave your cars at the front, your car keys at the front door.
To avoid altercations.
To avoid altercations. And then you see what they're
Crazy.
saying in Florida. They're telling, you know, their communities, come, we offer free firearm courses. We will teach you how to be a better shot.
That's wild.
So I'm not saying that's the answer necessarily either, but I do think that we need to do a better job of, we can't live in a society where only people who break the law are the ones with guns.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just can't. And that's where we're at. And that's why we have so many home invasions. And that's why we have so many carjackings. Nobody's worried about getting shot back.
Yeah. We definitely need to change that. With everything that you've done with your career in law, right? Have you ever thought of becoming a judge?
No,
Why not?
they don't make that much money.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, I love the business of law. I've always been an entrepreneur in
Mhm.
some way, some form. And there's no business, obviously, tied to being a judge. I don't think that I could work for the government. I don't think that I am constituted to work for the government.
Yeah.
I have always wanted to think and do outside of the box. And then the job itself. Like, number one, I don't have a poker face at
Mhm.
all. You know, I have colleagues. We talked about me working with teams of lawyers. So there are certain lawyers that I have worked with historically who will tell me during a trial to fix my face because
Mm.
a witness will say something, the Crown will say something, and it's written all over my face. As a
Right.
judge, you really can't show that impartiality. You can't interject.
Yeah.
I also, you know, I don't do assault cases. I don't want to do assault cases.
Mhm.
There are things in life that you just can't unsee. And the number of assault cases, especially against children in our system, are really prevalent. I don't
Mm.
want to deal with that. I think that I would also be really bothered by how low those sentences are. You know, you want to talk about low sentences. If you compare what's happening on drug cases versus assault cases, your head would explode.
Yeah.
You know, 4 or 5 years is like a long sentence for someone who's convicted of.
Yeah,
Where-
I've seen this before.
Yeah.
I've seen guys when I was inside that were like getting the same less sentences than me. I
Yes.
was in there for a gun, and guys that are in there, there were diddlers that had less time than me.
Yes. I've sat in courtrooms and watched sentencings for people. I watched one in Hamilton once. This guy was being sentenced for thousands of images of kitty on his computer that were horrific.
Mhm.
Like, the judge had to describe them into the record. I won't do that here, but we're talking like horrible, horrible abuse of girls as young as like
Wow.
children. The Crown and his lawyer jointly recommended a conditional sentence of 2 years less a day plus 3 years probation because they didn't want him to lose his job.
Oh, that's making my skin bro.
Right? Less time. And at that time, we were still getting mandatory minimum sentences for first offense firearms. So
Yeah.
I've got kids who feel like they're threatened because of the community they live with. They're walking around with a gun for their own protection because in that neighborhood they needed to, not using the gun, not robbing anyone, not hurting anyone, just trying to protect themselves, looking at a 3-year mandatory minimum in
Three
the
and a
pen.
half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. Our
So
system is
I don't
broken.
think I could do that as a judge.
Yeah.
I would just be like, no, you're getting 12 years. Get the fuck out of my courtroom.
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't stomach it. So there's things that our judges have to do. They have to follow these precedents that I am not made to do that.
You'd probably set like 10 new legal precedents.
Oh my God. I would be in the I would be taken to task by the Court of Appeal every other week because I would just be doing things that I'm not supposed to. I would want to send people to rehab instead of jail. I would want to send people into employment programs. You know, a young man that comes in front of me that says, listen, I want to do things different. I've just never had anyone show me. You know, I would want to give that leniency in order to help support them and therefore help support the community, because I
Yeah.
see the need for that. I see how beneficial that is to everyone. It's not just the individual.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing in the system.
Well, this is why we have people like you working here in the system on our side. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? And we appreciate you. Yo. I appreciate you having this conversation with me here today, man. Like, it's I can go on forever asking you a question because I have so many questions when it comes to so many cases, but we'll
Well,
leave
let's
that.
reconvene after Diddy's case is finished, and we
Yes.
can maybe break down what went wrong or what went right.
Let's do
Because
that.
then we'll have all the pieces in front of us.
I'm down. I'm
Amazing.
down.
I love it. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you. And what do you have coming up next?
Work-wise?
Yes.
So right now we've got a bit of a shuffle in the office. So, you know, always an entrepreneur, I've got to figure out how to make the office run even more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Case-wise, I have a gun case coming up next month. I have a drug and gun case in July, and then I've got an attempted murder in August. So
Wow.
busy summer nonetheless.
Yeah, and the podcast.
And the podcast every other week. Who Judges the Judge? Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
Okay. Dope.
Yes. Thank you so
Jordana
much.
Goldlist in the building. We're off of this. Deuces.
We
Thanks
love
for
hip
watching.
hop.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out these other videos on the screen and make sure to like and subscribe.
We love hip hop.